There is a power within you that does not shout, does not compete, does not announce itself, does not demand recognition, does not need applause, and does not tremble before the noise of the world. It is the power of silence, the sacred stillness beneath your thoughts, beneath your fears, beneath your plans, beneath the voice that says you are late, you are behind, you are not enough, you must hurry, you must prove, you must defend, you must become someone other than who you are. Silence is not the absence of life. Silence is the presence of a deeper life. It is not emptiness, it is fullness without noise. It is not weakness, it is strength without violence. It is not withdrawal. It is return. And when you learn to quiet your mind, when you learn to enter that holy interior space where the ego can no longer perform and the soul can finally speak, you begin to discover that the answers you have been chasing were never hiding from you. They were waiting for you to become quiet enough to receive them. Most people live as though the mind is their master. They wake up and immediately enter the stream of thought, the old rehearsals, the unfinished conversations, the anxieties about tomorrow, the regrets about yesterday, the invisible courtroom where they defend themselves before imaginary judges. The mind begins its commentary and they believe every word. It says, worry about this, replay that, compare yourself to them, protect yourself from love, hurry before you miss your life. Hold on to that resentment. Fear this future, regret that past, and because the voice is familiar, they mistake it for truth. But the mind is not always truth. The mind is often memory speaking in the language of prediction. The mind is often fear dressed as wisdom. The mind is often the ego trying to preserve the identity it built from old wounds. Silence is the moment you stop obeying every thought simply because it appeared. You are not your thoughts. This is one of the most liberating realizations a human being can have. You are the awareness in which thoughts arise. You are the spacious sky through which clouds pass. You are not the storm, though storms may move through you. You are not the noise, though noise may surround you. You are not the fear, though fear may visit. You are the witnessing presence, the quiet light, the eternal observer, the soul that was present before the mind learned language and will remain when every mental drama has dissolved. When you begin to recognize this, a great burden falls away. You no longer have to fight every thought. You no longer have to believe every thought. You no longer have to follow every thought into its maze. You can sit quietly and say, there is worry moving through me, but I am not worry. There is anger moving through me, but I am not anger. There is sadness moving through me, but I am not sadness. There is a thought saying I am not enough, but I am not that thought. I am the one who sees it. This is the doorway into inner freedom, not the elimination of all thoughts, but the end of unconscious identification with thought. The mind may continue to speak, but it no longer owns the throne. The ego may continue to comment, but it no longer writes the law. The old programming may continue to knock, but it no longer has authority to enter every room of your being. Silence gives you the sacred pause between stimulus and response, between fear and action, between wound and reaction, between memory and identity. In that pause, your soul returns. In that pause, wisdom enters. In that pause, you realize you do not have to become the old pattern again. The world fears silence because silence reveals what noise conceals. Noise can keep you busy enough to avoid your own heart. Noise can keep you entertained enough to postpone your healing. Noise can keep you outraged enough to avoid your grief. Noise can keep you comparing enough to avoid your calling. Noise can keep you chasing enough to avoid the terrifying simplicity of being. But silence has a way of removing the masks. It places you before yourself without decoration. It invites you to listen not to the personality you have constructed for survival, but to the soul beneath it. And this can feel uncomfortable at first, because many people have lived so long in distraction that peace feels unfamiliar, even threatening. The ego would rather suffer loudly than surrender quietly, because in silence, the ego is no longer the center of attention. But the discomfort of silence is not punishment. It is cleansing. When you sit quietly, you may first hear the noise more clearly, the unresolved fear rises, the old resentment appears. The sadness you outran stands at the door. The questions you avoided begin to breathe. This does not mean silence is failing, it means silence is working. When a pond becomes still, the mud that was stirred begins to settle, but before it settles, you may see what was clouding the water. So do not be afraid when silence shows you your inner weather. Do not run, do not judge. Do not say, I am not good at this. Simply remain. Breathe. Watch, let the waters clear. The soul is not disturbed by what the ego calls a mess. The soul knows that everything brought into awareness can be brought into healing. There is a reason the great spiritual traditions honor silence. The mystics went into deserts, caves, forests, monasteries, mountaintops, and inner rooms, not because they hated the world, but because they understood that the world is transformed by those who are no longer enslaved by its noise. The Tao speaks in silence. The Buddha sat beneath a tree in stillness. The prophets heard the voice of the divine, not in chaos, but in the quiet. The sages of every age have known that the deepest truth does not arrive as an argument. It arrives as a knowing. It does not need to scream. It waits patiently in the center of your being. And when your mind becomes quiet, you begin to hear what was always there. Silence is the language of God before it becomes words. Silence is the womb of intuition. Silence is the birthplace of inspired action. Silence is where you stop trying to force life and begin to cooperate with it. So much of human suffering comes from the refusal to be still. We rush to fix, rush to answer, rush to defend, rush to judge, rush to speak, rush to leave, rush to arrive. And in all that rushing, we abandon the intelligence that could have guided us. There is a wisdom that does not come through analysis. There is a knowing that does not come through argument. There is a direction that appears only when the inner waters are calm enough to reflect the stars. When you quiet your mind, you begin to see that many of your problems were not problems at all, but stories the mind told about conditions. The mind says this delay means you are forgotten. Silence says perhaps you are being prepared. The mind says this rejection means you are unworthy. Silence says perhaps you are being redirected. The mind says this uncertainty means you are unsafe. Silence says perhaps you are being invited into trust. The mind says this ending is punishment. Silence says perhaps this is release. The mind sees fragments. Silence feels the whole. The mind interprets from fear. Silence listens from eternity. This is why quieting the mind is not an escape from life. It is the way you stop misreading life. When you are noisy inside, you bring distortion to everything. You hear criticism where there was only a suggestion. You see rejection where there was only someone else's limitation. You turn a temporary setback into a permanent identity. You mistake inconvenience for injustice, uncertainty for danger, solitude for abandonment, and stillness for failure. But when you become quiet, perception is purified. You stop projecting old wounds onto new moments. You stop answering today with yesterday's fear. You stop making everyone in your present pay for someone in your past. You begin to meet life as it is, not merely as your conditioned mind expects it to be. Silence gives you back your energy. Every unnecessary thought has a cost. Every mental argument drains life force. Every replayed resentment keeps your nervous system trapped in an event that may no longer exist except in memory. Every imagined catastrophe spins the body's chemistry on a future that has not arrived. You were not designed to live constantly braced against life. You were designed to participate in life from presence. When the mind quiets, energy returns. The breath deepens. The body softens. The heart becomes less guarded. Creativity begins to move. You discover that exhaustion is not always from doing too much. Sometimes it is from thinking too much about what cannot be controlled. In silence, you learn the difference between real guidance and anxious compulsion. Anxiety is loud, urgent, repetitive, and full of threat. Guidance is quiet, steady, and often simple. Anxiety says, act now or everything will fall apart. Guidance says, take this step. Anxiety contracts the body. Guidance may challenge you, but beneath the challenge there is a strange steadiness. Anxiety is obsessed with outcome. Guidance is devoted to alignment. Anxiety wants certainty before movement. Guidance offers enough light for the next step, and you cannot easily tell the difference if your mind is constantly noisy. Silence refines the inner ear. It teaches you how truth feels. This is one of the priceless benefits of quieting your mind. You begin to trust yourself again. Not the impulsive self, not the frightened self, not the ego self that wants validation, but the deeper self, the wise self, the soul self. You begin to sense when a yes is truly yes and when it is people-pleasing. You begin to sense when a no is fear and when it is wisdom. You begin to sense when ambition is inspired and when it is compensation for insecurity. You begin to sense when love is open and when attachment is disguising itself as love. You begin to sense when rest is avoidance and when rest is obedience to your body's sacred rhythm. Silence does not make life smaller. It makes perception more accurate. The ego is terrified of this accuracy because the ego survives through confusion. It wants you to believe that you are what you own, what you achieve, what people think, what happened to you, what you fear, what you lack, what you can control. Silence slowly dissolves these illusions. In silence, you realize you are not the role. You are the awareness playing the role. You are not the achievement. You are the consciousness expressing through achievement. You are not the wound. You are the soul that can heal the wound. You are not the thought. You are the witness of thought. You are not the body alone. You are life moving through the body. This realization is not merely philosophical. It is transformative. When you no longer identify with the false self, you no longer have to defend it so desperately. So many arguments would end if the ego did not need to prove its existence through being right. So many resentments would dissolve if the mind did not keep polishing old injuries like sacred trophies. So much anxiety would soften if the personality did not believe it had to control the entire universe to be safe. Silence is power because it removes your compulsive need to react. A person who can sit quietly with discomfort is no longer easily manipulated. A person who can observe anger without becoming anger is no longer possessed by every provocation. A person who can hear criticism without collapsing is free. A person who can receive praise without addiction is free. A person who can stand in silence without needing to fill every space has returned to inner authority. There is a profound strength in not speaking immediately. There is a profound strength in not explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. There is a profound strength in letting a moment breathe before you answer. There is a profound strength in allowing another person's emotion to belong to them without absorbing it into your own nervous system. Silence is not passive when it is conscious. It is not avoidance when it is rooted in wisdom. Sometimes silence is the highest form of self-respect. Sometimes silence is the refusal to give your energy to a lower vibration. Sometimes silence is the way love protects itself from becoming entangled with egoic noise. But silence must not become suppression. This is important. To quiet the mind is not to bury the heart. It is not to swallow truth out of fear. It is not to become emotionally frozen and call it spirituality. Sacred silence is alive. It listens deeply, then speaks when speech is aligned. It rests before acting, then acts with clarity. It does not react from injury, but neither does it betray the truth. Silence is the space from which right speech is born. When you speak from silence, your words carry weight because they are not thrown by the ego. They arise from presence. They are fewer, cleaner, more compassionate, more direct. You stop talking to prove. You begin speaking to serve truth. Quieting the mind also opens the heart. This may surprise you because many people think the heart opens through emotion alone, but often the heart is buried beneath mental noise. You cannot feel the tenderness of the present moment when the mind is constantly dragging you into imagined futures and rehearsed pasts. You cannot feel the sacredness of another person when your mind is busy labeling them. You cannot feel gratitude when your mind is counting what is missing. You cannot feel love when your mind is defending the old wound. Silence clears the path from the head to the heart. It allows the warmth of being to return. In that warmth, healing begins. Healing does not always begin with analysis. Sometimes healing begins when you sit quietly and stop abandoning yourself. Sometimes healing begins when you place your hand on your heart and breathe with a part of you that has been waiting years for your attention. Sometimes healing begins when you no longer demand that your pain disappear instantly, but instead say, I am here now. I will not run from you. I will not make you my identity, but I will listen. Silence creates a compassionate space where old emotions can finally move. What you resist remains trapped. What you witness with love begins to transform. There are memories inside you that do not need more judgment. They need spaciousness. There are parts of you that do not need another lecture. They need presence. There are fears that do not need to be conquered through force. They need to be held in the light of awareness until they realize they are no longer alone. The inner child, the wounded self, the exhausted self, the disappointed self, the one who tried so hard to be loved, the one who felt unseen, the one who learned to perform. Please hide, control, or withdraw these parts. Begin to soften in silence. Not because silence erases the past, but because silence gives the past a new witness, a loving witness, an awakened witness, a witness who no longer confuses pain with identity, And when pain is no longer identity, freedom becomes possible. You can say, yes, this happened, but it is not the totality of who I am. Yes, I was hurt, but I am not here to organize my entire future around the wound. Yes, I made mistakes, but I am not the mistake. Yes, I was afraid, but I am not fear. Yes, I lived unconsciously, but I am awake now. Silence gives you the power to separate essence from experience. Experience is what passed through you. Essence is what remains when everything temporary has moved on. In silence, you begin to understand forgiveness, not as a moral performance, not as a way to excuse what harmed you, but as the release of noise from your own soul. Resentment is loud inside. It keeps speaking, it keeps explaining, it keeps replaying. It keeps demanding that the past become different. But the past cannot become different. Only your relationship to it can change. Forgiveness is the decision to stop letting the past occupy the center of your consciousness. It is the return of your energy from the hands of yesterday. It is not saying they were right. It is saying your peace is too sacred to be chained to their unconsciousness. Silence helps you forgive, because silence reveals the cost of holding on. It lets you feel the heaviness of resentment and the lightness of release. It shows you that there are no justified resentments if what you truly want is freedom. Quieting the mind does not make you indifferent. It makes you more loving, because you are no longer reacting from the defensive surface of yourself. You become capable of seeing others not only as their behavior, but as souls also conditioned by fear, longing, ignorance, pain, and unfinished healing. This does not mean you tolerate harm. Love without wisdom becomes enabling, but it does mean you stop dehumanizing others in your mind. You stop feeding hatred and calling it strength. You stop letting someone else's unconsciousness turn you into a smaller version of yourself. In silence, compassion grows, not sentimental compassion, but clear compassion, the kind that can bless, release, set boundaries, and remain inwardly free. Silence also teaches you how to live in the now. The mind is rarely here. It is usually in yesterday or tomorrow, in comparison or anticipation, in regret or strategy. But life is only ever here. The breath is here, the body is here, the bird outside the window is singing here, the light is touching the wall here, your heart is beating here. The divine presence is not hiding in some future achievement, it is here. It is the aliveness of this moment before the mind names it. When you quiet the mind, ordinary life becomes luminous. A cup of tea becomes meditation. A walk becomes prayer. A conversation becomes sacred exchange. A moment of rest becomes communion. You begin to see that you were not missing life because life was absent. You were missing life because thought was standing between you and the miracle. The present moment does not need to be dramatic to be holy. This is something the ego struggles to understand. The ego is always chasing intensity more, faster, louder, newer, greater. But the soul recognizes the eternal inside the simple. The soul can find God in silence, in breath, in still water, in the slow opening of a flower, in the quiet courage of beginning again, in the way sunlight enters a room without asking to be noticed. When the mind quiets, beauty returns. Not because beauty was absent, but because your awareness is no longer too crowded to receive it. Creativity also returns in silence. The greatest ideas often arise not when you force the mind, but when you give it space. The poem comes in the quiet. The solution comes on a walk. The insight comes after surrender. The melody comes when you stop chasing it. The next step appears when you stop strangling the future with anxiety. Silence is not empty, it is generative. It is the dark soil in which seeds awaken. It is the pause between notes that makes music possible. It is the blank page before creation. It is the womb of form. If you want to create a new life, do not only work harder, become quieter. Let inspiration find an uncluttered room. This does not mean you abandon discipline. Silence deepens discipline. When the mind is quiet, you can see what matters. You stop wasting energy on false urgencies. You stop scattering yourself across 1,000 distractions. You stop confusing busyness with purpose. You begin to act from clarity. One aligned action from silence can be more powerful than 100 frantic actions from fear. The quiet mind chooses better. It knows when to move and when to wait, when to speak and when to listen, when to hold on and when to release. It recognizes that true power is not constant motion. True power is right motion. Every day you can practice this, not as a performance, not as another demand placed upon yourself. Simply sit. Close your eyes if you wish. Breathe naturally. Let the body be held by the chair, the floor, the earth. Notice the thoughts as they arise. Do not chase them. Do not push them away. Let them pass like birds crossing the sky. Return to the breath. Return to the body. Return to the silent witness. If you hear noise outside, include it. If you feel emotion, include it. If the mind says, this is not working, include that too. Silence is not fragile. It can hold everything. You are not trying to create stillness by force. You are noticing the stillness that already exists beneath movement. At first, you may only touch it for a few seconds. That is enough. A few seconds of true presence can begin to interrupt years of unconsciousness, then return again and again. Like coming home after wandering through many streets. Each return strengthens the pathway. The mind learns that it does not have to run every moment. The body learns that stillness is safe. The heart learns that it can be heard. The soul learns that you are finally listening. Do not say, I have no time for silence. That is like saying you have no time to breathe while drowning. Silence is not a luxury for people with easy lives. It is a necessity for those who wish to live awake. Even 1 minute before you answer a difficult message. 1 breath before you react. 1 quiet walk without filling your ears. 1 morning moment before the phone. 1 evening pause before sleep. These are not small things. They are openings. They are sacred interruptions of the trance. They are ways of telling your soul, I am available. And what happens when you become available? Peace begins to rise, not always as emotion, but as foundation. You may still face challenges. You may still experience loss, uncertainty, disappointment, and change, but you are less easily uprooted. You begin to carry a quiet center that circumstances cannot immediately purchase. You become like a deep lake. The surface may ripple, but the depths remain still. This depth is priceless. No one can give it to you, and no one can take it from you unless you abandon it. It is cultivated in silence. It is protected by awareness. It is strengthened every time you choose presence over panic. Your relationships change when your mind becomes quiet. You listen differently. You no longer listen only to reply, correct, defend, or compare. You listen for the soul beneath the words. You hear what is being said and what is not being said. You become less reactive. You stop bringing old arguments into new conversations. You stop making assumptions as quickly. You stop needing everyone to agree with you in order to feel secure. You become capable of giving others the gift of presence, and presence is one of the rarest forms of love. Many people have been spoken to, advised, judged, instructed, and analyzed, but not truly heard. Silence teaches you to hear. And when you hear deeply, you love more wisely. You stop trying to control others into becoming your idea of peace. You stop using relationships to escape yourself. You stop demanding that another person quiet the mind you have not learned to quiet within. You stop placing your entire sense of safety in someone else's mood. You become rooted, and from that rootedness, your love becomes freer. You can care without clinging. You can support without rescuing. You can speak truth without attacking. You can leave without hatred. You can stay without self-betrayal. Silence matures love. Your dreams change too. They become less ego-driven and more soul-guided. In noise, you may chase dreams that belong to comparison. In silence, you discover dreams that belong to calling. In noise, you may want success to prove you are enough. In silence, you want to create because creation is the natural expression of your being. In noise, you may want wealth to defeat insecurity. In silence, you want abundance to expand freedom, service, beauty, and possibility. In noise, you may want recognition to heal invisibility. In silence, you realize you were seen by the divine before any human applauded. From that place, ambition is purified. It becomes devotion. This is why silence is power. It restores you to your proper source. The ego seeks power through control. The soul knows power as alignment. The ego says, I must make life obey me. The soul says, I must become available to the intelligence that moves life. The ego forces. The soul allows. The ego grasps. The soul trusts. The ego performs. The soul expresses. The ego fears stillness because it cannot dominate it. The soul loves stillness because it recognizes home. There is a sacred paradox here. When you stop trying to control everything, you often become more effective. When you stop chasing approval, your presence becomes stronger. When you stop needing to speak constantly, your words become more powerful. When you stop identifying with every thought, your mind becomes clearer. When you stop running from yourself, life stops feeling like a place you must escape. Silence does not remove you from the world. It returns you to the world with your spirit intact. Before every major decision, enter silence. Not to avoid responsibility, but to hear beyond fear. Ask inwardly, is this choice expanding me or shrinking me? Is this love or attachment? Is this wisdom or fear? Is this calling or comparison? Is this peace or people-pleasing? Is this surrender or avoidance? Is this surrender or avoidance? Then listen not only with the mind, but with the body, the breath, the heart, the quiet knowing beneath language. The answer may not come instantly, but if you create space, the deeper intelligence will begin to organize your perception. You may feel a release, a heaviness, a clear no, a gentle yes, a surprising calm, or a persistent inner nudge. Honor it. The soul often speaks softly because it does not need to manipulate you. It invites. Quieting your mind also changes your relationship with time. The noisy mind is always late. It is late to its imagined future, late compared to others, late according to old expectations, late according to the ego's timetable. But silence brings you into the timeless. In the timeless, you realize that your life is unfolding not as a race, but as a ripening. The fruit does not hate itself for being green in spring. The moon does not apologize for its phases. The tide does not rush to prove it belongs to the ocean. You too are allowed to unfold. Silence helps you stop abusing yourself with imaginary deadlines that have nothing to do with your soul's wisdom. That does not mean you become passive. It means you move without self-violence. You act with commitment, not panic. You honor your dreams, but you no longer use them as weapons against your present self. You grow, but you do not hate the stage you are in. You improve, but you do not declare yourself unworthy until improvement is complete. Silence teaches you that becoming is sacred at every phase. There is an enormous healing in simply being without needing to justify your existence. Sit quietly and do nothing useful for a moment. The ego will protest. It will say you are wasting time. You should be producing, proving, solving, answering, achieving. But beneath that protest is an old wound, the belief that your worth depends on output. Silence says no. You are worthy before you produce. You are loved before you achieve. You are enough before you are applauded. Your being precedes your doing, and when doing flows from being, it becomes far more beautiful. This is one of the deepest benefits of silence. It returns you to enoughness. The world profits from your inner noise. It sells to your insecurity, distracts your attention, inflames your fear, compares your life, and convinces you that peace is always one purchase, one achievement, one relationship, one transformation away. Silence interrupts that spell. It says, return to the center. Nothing outside you can give you the self you have abandoned within. Nothing outside you can substitute for inner union. Nothing outside you can permanently quiet a mind that has not learned to rest in its source. When you become silent, you begin to feel the presence that has always been with you. Call it God, Spirit, Source, Tao, the higher self, the divine intelligence, or simply life. The name matters less than the direct experience. It is the sense that you are held in something larger than your personal story. It is the quiet recognition that you do not breathe yourself. You are being breathed. You do not beat your own heart. Life is beating it. You do not grow the trees, spin the earth, move the galaxies, or heal the cells by personal command. A vast intelligence is already operating. Silence lets you trust it. Silence lets you stop pretending you are alone. And when you know you are not alone, fear loses some of its authority. You may still feel fear, but fear no longer becomes your religion. You may still plan, but planning no longer replaces trust. You may still work, but work no longer replaces worth. You may still desire, but desire no longer becomes desperation. You may still grieve, but grief no longer proves abandonment. A quiet mind can hold the paradox of human life. You are vulnerable and eternal, temporary and infinite, individual and inseparable from the whole. You are a wave, yes, but you are also ocean. Live from that knowing, and your life becomes less reactive and more creative. You stop spending your best energy defending the false self You begin investing energy in expressing the true self. You stop asking, how do I appear? You begin asking what is true. You stop asking, what will they think? You begin asking, what is aligned? You stop asking, how can I control the outcome? You begin asking, how can I serve this moment with love, clarity, and courage? These questions arise naturally from silence because silence brings you close to essence. The priceless benefit of quieting your mind is not merely relaxation, though relaxation may come. It is not merely stress reduction, though stress may decrease. It is awakening. It is the recognition that you have been living inside mental weather while mistaking it for the whole sky. It is the realization that the ego's urgent commentary is not the voice of God. It is the return to a deeper intelligence, a deeper peace, a deeper power. It is the reclaiming of your attention from the marketplace of fear. It is the end of being dragged by every thought into emotional exile. It is the beginning of living from the center. So make silence a companion. Let it walk with you. Let it sit beside you in the morning. Let it enter your conversations as patience. Let it enter your work as focus. Let it enter your conflict as restraint. Let it enter your grief as tenderness. Let it enter your joy as gratitude. Let it enter your ambition as alignment. Let it enter your prayers, not only as words spoken, but as space received. Do not only speak to the divine, listen. Do not only ask. Become quiet enough to receive. Sometimes the answer is not a sentence. Sometimes the answer is peace. Sometimes the answer is a release of tension. Sometimes the answer is a quiet courage. Sometimes the answer is the sudden absence of the fear that had been leading you. There will be days when silence feels easy, like resting in warm sunlight. There will be days when silence feels difficult, like sitting at the edge of an inner storm. Practice on both days. The benefit is not in having a perfect experience. The benefit is in returning. Every return to silence is a declaration that you are no longer fully governed by noise. Every return tells the mind, you may speak, but you are not the master. Every return tells the soul, I am listening. Every return tells the body, we are safe enough to be still. Every return builds the inner sanctuary. And this sanctuary goes with you. It is not dependent on location. You can carry silence into crowded streets, into difficult meetings, into family gatherings, into uncertain seasons, into hospital rooms, into airports, into celebrations, into grief. Inner silence does not require the world to be quiet. It requires you to remember the quiet beneath the world. At first, you may need external stillness to find it. Later, you discover it is always here, like the depth of the ocean beneath waves. The surface of life may be loud, but depth remains. Begin to notice the small spaces, the pause after exhale, the moment before speaking, the stillness between two thoughts, the quiet before dawn, the calm after honest tears, the openness after forgiveness, the space between wanting and grasping, the space between being hurt and reacting. These spaces are doorways. Enter them. They are small only to the ego. To the soul, they are infinite. In these spaces, you can choose differently. You can choose not to send the angry message. You can choose not to rehearse the insult. You can choose not to betray your boundary. You can choose not to call yourself cruel names. You can choose not to confuse urgency with guidance. You can choose not to make fear your identity. You can choose love. Not sentimental love, but awakened love. You can choose peace, not avoidance, but rooted peace. You can choose truth, not aggression, but clarity. You can choose freedom, not escape, but inner release. This is how a life changes. Not always in one dramatic moment, but through thousands of quiet returns to consciousness. A thought arises and you witness it. A fear arises and you breathe. A resentment arises and you release. A desire arises and you listen beneath it. A decision appears and you enter silence before choosing. A wound is touched and you hold it instead of becoming it. Over time, the nervous system learns a new way. The mind becomes less tyrannical. The heart becomes less guarded. The soul becomes more audible. Life begins to feel less like a battle and more like a sacred participation. You may discover in silence that the thing you thought you needed is not what your soul truly wants. You may discover that the relationship you were chasing was a mirror of an old wound. You may discover that the success you were desperate for was an attempt to earn love. You may discover that the conflict you kept feeding was protecting you from grief. You may discover that the dream you buried is still alive. You may discover that your body has been asking for rest. You may discover that your anger is a boundary. You may discover that your sadness is a doorway to compassion. You may discover that beneath all your striving, there's a simple longing to come home to yourself. And when you come home to yourself, the world does not necessarily become perfect, but you stop being homeless inside your own life. That is power. To be at home within is to walk through uncertainty with a quiet dignity. To be at home within is to let praise and criticism pass through without losing your center. To be at home within is to stop begging every circumstance to define you. To be at home within is to know that no outer achievement is worth the loss of your soul, and no outer failure can take the soul away. Silence will teach you that you do not need to win every argument. You do not need to answer every accusation. You do not need to fix every perception. You do not need to chase every opportunity. You do not need to fear every ending. You do not need to obey every impulse. You do not need to carry every burden. You do not need to prove what is already true in the sight of spirit. Your worth is not a debate. Your peace is not a luxury. Your soul is not an afterthought. Your life is not a performance. Let the mind become quiet, and you will hear something more ancient than thought. You will hear the whisper that says you are guided. You will hear the silence that says you are not what happened. You will hear the stillness that says begin again. You will hear the presence that says I have been here all along. And perhaps you will weep, not because anything dramatic has occurred, but because you finally realize how long you have been running from the place where peace was waiting. Do not be harsh with yourself for the years of noise. You were doing what you knew. You were surviving. You were trying to be safe. You were trying to be loved. You were trying to make sense of life with the tools you had. Bless that version of yourself. Bless the one who worried. Bless the one who overthought. Bless the one who reacted. Bless the one who chased. Bless the one who could not sit still because stillness felt like danger. Bless them all, and then gently lead them into the sanctuary of now. Say, we do not have to live that way anymore. We can breathe. We can listen. We can rest in the deeper power. And as you cultivate this silence, you become a blessing to others without even trying. A quiet mind does not add unnecessary turbulence to the world. A peaceful presence gives others permission to exhale. A person rooted in silence can enter a room and bring steadiness, not because they are superior, but because they are connected. They are not leaking anxiety everywhere. They are not demanding that others regulate them. They're not using noise to fill emptiness. They carry an atmosphere. And sometimes the most healing thing you can offer another human being is not advice, not correction, not a brilliant solution, but your grounded, silent, loving presence. Imagine living this way. Imagine waking and not handing your mind immediately to the world. Imagine beginning in stillness, remembering who you are before the roles begin. Imagine moving through the day with pauses of breath, moments of listening, choices made from clarity rather than compulsion. Imagine entering conflict without losing yourself. Imagine hearing your intuition before the ego floods the room. Imagine ending the day by releasing the mental noise and returning to the divine presence within. This life is possible. Not perfectly, not without human moments, but sincerely, increasingly, beautifully possible. You do not need to disappear into a monastery to know silence. You can find it while washing dishes, driving, walking, waiting, breathing. You can turn ordinary moments into altars. Let the phone remain untouched for a few minutes. Let the meal be eaten without distraction. Let the walk be walked without filling every second with sound. Let the morning be entered gently. Let the night close with gratitude. Let your breath become a temple bell calling you back. Silence is not elsewhere. It is beneath everything. And the more you return, the more you will understand that silence is not something you create. It is something you uncover. It was there before the thought. It remains after the thought. It holds the thought without being changed by it. It is the background of your being. It is the open field in which life appears. When you rest there, even briefly, you touch the part of yourself that is already free. So today, let silence become your teacher. Let it show you what fear has been hiding. Let it show you what love has been whispering. Let it show you where your energy has been leaking. Let it show you which dreams are authentic and which are borrowed. Let it show you what must be forgiven, what must be released, what must be honored, what must be spoken, what must be left behind, what must be begun. Let silence wash your inner eyes until you can see again. You have lived long enough under the dictatorship of noise. You have worried enough, rehearsed enough, compared enough, explained enough, defended enough, carried enough. There is another way. It begins with a breath. It begins with a pause. It begins with the humble willingness to sit with yourself and not run. It begins when you say, I do not need to believe every thought. I do not need to obey every fear. I do not need to fill every space. I am willing to become quiet. I am willing to listen. I am willing to return. And in that return, you will find what no amount of noise could ever give you. You will find the peace that is not dependent on circumstances. You will find the guidance that does not flatter the ego but frees the soul. You will find the love that does not need to be earned. You will find the strength that does not need to dominate. You will find the clarity that does not need to rush. You will find the freedom of being present in your own life. Silence is power because silence brings you back to source. Silence is power because it breaks the spell of the false self. Silence is power because it gives you space to choose again. Silence is power because it turns reaction into wisdom, fear into observation, resentment into release, confusion into listening, striving into alignment, loneliness into communion, and ordinary moments into sacred ground. Return to silence and you return to yourself. Return to yourself and you return to the divine. Return to the divine and you discover that nothing essential was ever missing. Beneath the noise, you were whole. Beneath the fear, you were guided. Beneath the striving, you were worthy. Beneath the confusion, you were held. Beneath the restless mind, there was always a still, luminous presence waiting patiently for your attention. Enter that presence, rest there, live from there, and let the quiet become the power that heals your heart, clears your mind, awakens your soul, and guides your life back into harmony with the sacred intelligence that has been whispering within you all along.